All right, this is awkward. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. I was asked to come in here and tell you a little bit about what's been going on with us over in West Olympia. So just a little bit about me to begin with. I'm a missionary kid. Was raised in the 80s in the Philippines during the Marcos dictatorship, during the People Power Revolution and whatnot. And kind of pulling from that background, we went all over that area. There was just lots of political uprising and stuff, and the people coming up, and the government smashing them from over here, and the rebels smashing them from over there. And one of the things that I took away from that, there was a lot of stuff obviously, but one of the things was that it seemed that obviously the people that controlled the firearms in these countries were the ones that were either in power or trying to take power, and the average citizen was getting squashed in the middle. And so, of course, here I am in these environments, and I keep hearing about this wonderful place called the United States of America, where I'm from, where everybody gets to have a gun. And I thought that was pretty awesome. Of course, after I grew up a little bit, I understood why that was so awesome. That the right to protect oneself with the best possible equipment and tools that you could use was a constitutional right that was guaranteed as an American citizen. In fact, believe it or not, even if you're not an American citizen, but you are legally in the country, you still have these protections from the Constitution and these guaranteed rights for freedom of speech, as well as the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, as well as all the other protections that are in there. So early on, it really got me into this, the firearms industry as it was in those areas. So when I moved back, actually a little story real quick, the very first rifle I ever shot was this M16. I was in the jungle in the southern Philippines, and we were shooting a coconut that was out in this rice paddy thing, and I remember how big this weapon was, but how easy it was to actually hit what I was aiming at. Not a lot of recoil, and I think I might have been, oh, I don't know, probably 12 at the time. And I noticed on the side of it, it said M16 property of the U.S. government, so I'm sure somebody stole it from somebody, but on the other side of it, it said Oli Wa. And it took me many, many years before I realized that the Oli Wa actually meant Olympia, Washington, and that particular firearm was made by Olympic Arms in Nisqually Valley, here locally. So being born in Lacey, but of course raised in other countries, I was like, yeah, this is great. Not only did I find this thing that I really like, but it's actually from where I'm from, you know? So when I came back to the United States to learn to be an American, I decided I wanted to work in the industry, and I really looked for this place. And when I found it, of course, they wouldn't give me a job to save my life because I didn't know what I was doing. So I ended up working for a guy by the name of Larry, and he ran Larry's Guns for many years over off of Martin Way. I don't know how many of you know that business there. But I worked for him for about 4 years, every year, applying down to Olympic Arms. And then finally, one day, they finally gave me a job down there. So it was great. I had the job of my dreams, which was really me in a cubicle answering a phone and being like, yeah, sure, okay, fine. And so I didn't really get to play with anything. Not like at the other job, which was very hands-on. So after years of doing this, I decided at some point I was going to do my own thing. I was going to open it up. I saw some pretty significant problems with the industry and the way it was applied to the citizens. You have these guys who are the arms dealers. They're the ones with the federally licensed shops, the brick and mortars, and they really are that kind of gatekeeper that allows, literally the only way that the citizenry can get access to new firearms and new technology is if they go through this dealer, because all distributors and manufacturers are only allowed to sell to that dealer because of the licenses that are involved. You have to go to a guy who has something to sell, who's allowed by the federal government, who has paid his thousands of dollars a year, who's actually has set up, which took forever, background check things with the federal government and the NICS check system. And they're running you through all the rigmarole and this and that, which is all controlled by the federal government. And at any given point, you hear a lot about how people say, oh, they're coming to take our guns. Well, they don't have to take your guns. They can really just cut the supply off because their computer is down. And as long as their computer is down, we can't sell a thing. So keep that in mind anytime you end up having these discussions with people about that, because taking them away is really not the issue. Having access to new injections of those things into the citizenry is really what keeps that alive. So obviously, since this was a really important aspect of my life, I decided to go off on my own and change a few things. I noticed that a lot of these dealers that were out there, they're in it for the pawn shop aspect of it. They want to make a quick buck, and whether you're selling a gun or you're selling a car or you're selling, pantyhose, it doesn't matter. If you can buy it for cheap and mark it up for whatever and somebody's willing to pay you for it, that's where they want to be. But really they were missing the whole boat. And the whole point of being in that business in the first place is that you're a little bit of this gatekeeper, so to speak. You have a responsibility to the citizenry to allow that gate to remain open and do everything that you can that you're supposed to be doing to license yourself properly, to obey those laws properly, to anything, even if you don't like the laws that are put into place, you have to adhere to those things, and it's your job to go out there to learn those things and to listen to what people have to say when they're talking about these new laws that are coming in, which the ones on the books are obviously not very enforceable with how they have a lot of stuff written this way. But it is your job, because the average guy doesn't know a lot about what he's doing. So in the industry, the best way that we can serve the public is by learning what those laws are, adhering to those laws, and making sure that every single transaction is possibly as safe as we possibly can make it. So a lot of people think a lot of the business is all willy-nilly, which it's absolutely not. It's one of the most regulated businesses that you could ever get into. And used to be, and this is like taking something, I'm sure a lot of you remember, at some point you could have bought a gun just off of, well, now, which is the internet, a catalog, I guess. You could go in there, you could pick the picture out. I mean, even on the back of comic books, it had, guns and rifles and whatever else you wanted. You could get on there and you could sign a little, check and mail it off, and a couple weeks later all your firearms and ammunition showed up. So they basically took this thing that was a tool used for good and for bad, and they regulated the crap out of it. So that way only certain people would be allowed to have those things. A lot of the way we in the industry kind of look at some of this regulation, not only is it redundant, but it's extremely racist. Because you take a look and you look at everybody that actually has these things and everybody that doesn't want you to have those things, and most of the time these people are very, how should we say, they're only thinking about their best interest. They have their bodyguards, they have their stuff, and so predominantly, generally, because, and obviously there's all kinds of poor racially, but we know very clear that minorities kind of hold the, who's the poorest winning card when it comes to that. A lot of it can be society. There's plenty of reasons why that may be the case. But one good way to make sure that minorities, for example, cannot get those things that they need to protect themselves is by making it almost too spendy. It costs too much. The licenses are too much. You didn't do this or you didn't do that. A lot of different states. We're lucky in this state because we're a must-issue state. If you have a clean background and you want to buy a gun, you have every right to do so. You still got to jump through all the hoops as everybody else. But there's no, we may give you a license for this, or it's up to our decision, like it is in Nevada or California, obviously, which would be the worst. But I speak on that a little bit because it's pretty important to me. But just what I wanted to do is I wanted to explain to you how I got into the business and what it's done to me since then. So I've been in the business here for about the last 30 years, working for other people, other businesses, manufacturers and whatnot. And so I didn't like what they wanted to do, so I wanted to go and start something for myself. And so we put a different spin on it as far as that's concerned. Everybody around here seems to be pretty in your face about how they believe politically and and socially. And so why not the gun industry? Why not Second Amendment rights advocate? And you see that a lot, you know, I mean, I don't know, carrying your AK-47 into Starbucks is probably not the right way to do it. But you know, there's a time and a place for everything. But we wanted to be represented. But also, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, it's been a very long time since anybody has ever had a gun shop, a mom and pop gun shop in the city limits of Olympia. In fact, when we started, I believe they went back and looked and it was 47 years. So I don't know how much you guys know about the turnover of businesses in certain areas, but 47 years to not have a store in one industry is ridiculous. The fact is almost pretty much every other surrounding city has had many in the last 50 years that have come up and gone down and closed and become new, but not in the city of Olympia. So because that was kind of the you know, behind enemy lines, so to speak, as an industry, we looked at everybody over in Lacey here and over by Hawks Prairie, and everybody feels nice and comfortable with what they're doing. But in Olympia, I mean, you are right there. You're right next to the Capitol, right next to the college, and all of that stuff. So we started off by creating a company called The Private Sector LLC, which of course everybody knows the private sector is opposite of the public sector, which is run by the government and everything. But also the Private Sector LLC, what is that? I mean, you can't see that name and tell you what I do. I mean, it just doesn't tell you anything. So we went around and we got all of the licenses that we needed for a retail variety store in the city limits of Olympia under that name. We applied for, I want to say it must have been 20 different doing business as trade names, $5 a piece. That was super expensive. But we got them in there, and one of those things happened to be Private Sector Arms, which was what we were going for. Once we had gotten all of the licenses for the business, the LLC and the UBI and all this and that, we had to apply for our federal firearms license. Federal firearms license applied through the ATF, having pretty much zero contact whatsoever locally here. So when they give you your federal firearms license, there's a little stipulation on there which says not valid unless all of the other state requirements are met. So they got no problem giving it to you. You could be in California and they give you one. But if you haven't met the state requirements for that, for dealing in firearms, then their federal license is not applicable. It doesn't work. So they'll give it to you freely. So we got that one. And then so the very last thing was to apply for the Washington State Firearms and Ammunition Dealer's License, which I was very, very happy to find that it had nothing to do with City Hall. In fact, it had literally nothing to do with the state of Washington. It was exactly like a concealed weapons permit, where I went down to Ole PD on the other side of City Hall and paid my $125, showed them my FFL and all my IDs, and they did a background check on me, fingerprinted me, and in 3 or 4 days, with a clean background, boom, here you go. Here's a license to deal in all of that stuff. But the city never really found out what we were doing until I applied for our sign on the front of our building, which says Private Sector Arms for an Armed Citizenry. So I wasn't quite sure that they were going to let me, do that, but they did. And then, of course, one thing led to another, and a couple people were informed that we were there. And so we're going on about 4.5 years coming up, or 4 years coming up. The whole side of the street, everything was covered with these big giant banners. You guys seen all these flags and everything, PCS Mobile, they got these huge flags that are all up and down the west side. Well, all of that, according to the city ordinance, is absolutely illegal. You cannot have that stuff. Of course, I didn't read the city ordinance, so I bought one of the millions that are on that road that was a giant AR that said guns on it, right? And stuck that sucker right out off of Harrison Avenue. Well, oddly enough, you wouldn't believe this, I'm sure, unless I was telling it to you, but I got a visit from somebody from the city who said, hey, don't you know that is against city ordinance? You cannot have that out there. You cannot show the public this big giant 14-foot flag. And so I walked out of the front of my building and I pointed at the 50 PCS Mobile ones and the Firestone tire company one down on the side. And I said, well, I'm not one of those guys generally to jump off the cliff if everybody else does it, but at the same time, have you talked to any of these people, or are you talking to me because there's a gun on my flag? And she goes, I'm talking to you because we had a complaint. In fact, nobody really cares about the flags, but we had a complaint that your flag offended somebody, and so we came here to tell you to take it down. I said, okay, what happens if I don't take it down? She goes, well, I'm going to give you 90 days to take it down, and if I come back in 90 days and it's still up, then we're going to cite you. I said, how much are you going to cite me? And she said, well, it's probably going to be about $150. I said, okay, and then do I get another 90 days for that $150? It's a little cheaper to do that than the other advertisement I'm doing. So, and she's like, well, if you keep this up, then we're gonna take your business license and we're gonna do this. And she started threatening me a bunch after I told her I'd be willing to pay the price, right? Well, 3 days later, everybody else's flag was also down, and they went up and down that street, told everybody to take their stuff down. So we took that down. In our first month, we were visited by the West Side Fire Department 4 times. And they came in and they inspected the building, and we hadn't really even turned the open sign on. We were in there still working stuff out and fixing everything up. And they came in, and every time they came in, they would come in with 6, 7, 8 guys. And I've never seen that many firemen in one group that was not actually actively engaged in fighting a fire. So they came in, and the first thing they did is they walked in and walked around and hey, good morning, can we help you? Yeah, we're here to inspect the place. Oh, well, is that, because I have a thing here that says that the fire inspection is supposed to be like literally in about 40 days from now. And so we just moved in and we're getting ready for that. He's like, yeah, well, we're going to inspect the place because we need to know how to break in here. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, black powder, and they had all this stuff about the way everything was stored and whatnot, which, I'm very familiar with how to safely store these things, and none of which what they were saying had anything to do with reality. So I let them walk around the place a little bit, and they literally actively engaged in opening the door and seeing if they could break in and all of this kind of stuff, and checked out my security system. And I was like, okay, so what was the point again? Well, you guys, if you sleep here. Well, nobody sleeps here. It's a place of business. Well, if you did. No one's going to sleep here. Well, we need to know how we're going to break in here to save you. Yeah, so don't do that. No one's in here. Call the police. If there's a fire, hose it from the outside. I really don't know why you got to break in here. Well, that was the first time. They did it 3 more times in 30 days. And every time they brought somebody in, there was somebody else that came in with them. And every once in a while, it's kind of, oh, I recognize that guy or whatever. Finally, by the 4th group that came in, I told them, okay, I'll let you in this time again. And keep in mind, too, they have keys to this place. They actually have a key. I buy my business key from a place downtown who owns my key and my locks and gives them to law enforcement and gives them to the fire department. I don't know if that's normal, but that's what the case is in the place of our business. So I told them, I said, you've been in here, you've tried to figure out how to rob me, apparently, or save me. I really don't know which it is, but I'm pretty sure that if I ever do get robbed, the very first thing I'm going to do is point to the firemen, unfortunately, of the west side of Olympia, because you guys have been here stalking the place ever since I moved in. They've never been back after that. So I don't know what the deal was, but I was pretty sure that was pretty rare, right? So then we get another person from City Hall to come down and try to explain to me how my sign is going to fall down and hurt somebody. However, the sign is painted on the building. So that was a little bit hard.
Donnie, it happens.
It does. It does. There's my painter right there. Right. So yeah. Anyway, it's been pretty good. We've got a lot of notoriety because of the place where we put it. Location, right? We have had the news. There's a couple people from King 5 and Channel 7 and stuff. They live down Cooper Point. So as they were piling by, since there's not one single arms dealer in the entire state wants to talk to them, to the news media, or to let them come in and take pictures of whatever they think an assault rifle looks like at the time. We decided to open our doors because I'm broke and don't have any marketing budget. So sure, come on in. We'll educate you and show you these weapons. And so we've had them come in here and there. We did, however, experience some pretty big backlash from the, I'm assuming from the college, might not been in college. Some of these people, I don't even know if they could get into a college, so I don't know why everybody blames the colleges, right? But anyway, we had this lady, this individual showed up and started calling me a Nazi and pulled one of the plastic guns that we have on display there and pointed at me and pulled the trigger like extremely, like expecting something to happen, and when nothing did, they were very upset about it. So I took my camera and I put it on the stand to, I didn't know what they were going to do. And as it turns out, after calling me a Nazi and using all this anti-Semitic bad words, which I didn't even know what they were until that person brought them up, walked around and found these free Bibles. We got this stack of free Bibles. My dad gave me like 9 of them, and in the months, they were there for like 6 months, and in the months before that, nobody, like I think 2 people grabbed the Bible on the way out the door, It's not like we throw one in with every gun or anything. It's just sitting right there with a sign, free Bibles, right? Make you feel good after you buy a gun, I guess. Anyway, only two ever walked out the door until this individual shows up and proceeds to see the Bibles and oh, these free Bibles, yeah, go ahead, you can take one, you can have it. Sure, read it, burn it, whatever you're going to do, just, you can have it, right? Oh, really? So I got a bunch of friends, I need this whole stack. I said, sure, fine, take the stack. You're crazy, and I'd like to see you walk around the west side with a stack full of Bibles in your hand, being crazy. I just think that'd be interesting. Go right ahead. You go ahead and take it. So she took them. She kicked the door open, threw them outside, and then proceeded to go outside and take these Bibles and chuck them against our building, like really, really hard, right? So I'm going to take you back real quick. A year and 1 day before that, the day after Trump was elected, somebody spray painted FU 12 times all over the building in the front, and then proceeded to Gorilla Glue our doors shut in the front of the business and in the back of the business. Then a year and a day later, this individual shows up, starts throwing Bibles at us and everything, got her on video. I threw it on Facebook, thought it'd be funny for my friends. It had 1 million hits before literally the next day. So it really hit big. But I just want to end by saying that regardless of what it is that you're doing, when you're going out there, as long as you're serving the community and you're getting the people what it is that they need, it's going to be worth it in the end, even if you're taking all these hits from City Hall and everything else. And at the very least, the Rotary will ask you to come up and tell your story. Anyway, thank you very much.